This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 57 of Horsemanship Radio, brought to you by Index Fund Advisors, IFA.com. Horsemanship Radio is a part of the family of the Horse Radio Network. And today we have two couples that are legend in the team pinning industry, the discipline of team pinning, Western reining, but they don't even know it. It's going to be great. This is Debbie Laux, and you're listening to the Horsemanship Radio. Thank you for joining us. Horsemanship Radio airs on the 1st and the 15th of the month, and I have my producer, Jen, with me today. Hi, Jen.
Hello, Debbie.
So glad that you're joining me today because, team pinning with carriage driving just isn't the same. So we're gonna, and I know that you have been kind of playing with some of this Western stuff.
I have.
So I thought you'd be interested in this. I thought of you when we were setting this interview up. And what we did was we pre-recorded. So this is going to be pre-recorded today, but and you haven't heard it yet.
No, I haven't.
But we're going to be talking about the roots of team pinning. And that means going back to where did it get birthed and what is it and what's it all about and things like that. What do you think?
That's going to be fascinating because I know, I didn't grow up in the Western disciplines culture. So I know very little about the origins of any of this stuff. So I'm very curious to hear about how all this started. And I think that's timely because we're seeing now that these, I don't know what you call them. I wouldn't call them rodeo sports, but these disciplines that require athleticism and independence from the competitor, working cattle, for example, and a more of an all-around trading regime for the competitive horse. Those things are really gaining a lot of popularity with all of the different ranch disciplines with the AQHA and other breeds. So this is a very timely topic now with the rise of those disciplines.
Yeah, I think so too. And the thing that's so interesting, a couple of things that you'll hear, and you listen all the way through, you'll hear all these different points that we're going to make, but you're going to hear that not only does it have some roots in the transition time from horses being, your mode of transportation, your tractor, your livelihood. It's that transition time when team pinning came into being, when people had the wonderful athletic horses, but it wasn't really that they were ranching anymore with them. And so what do you do? And
So it grew out of that industrial revolution where steam engines and then tractors and the internal combustion engine came to be. And
then what do you do with horses?
And
people have this appreciation for a lot of American quarter horses. You're absolutely right. But they had an appreciation for a good, good level-headed horse that would carry you through thick and thin and certainly go work ranch cattle. And then it also, the second point is it's become very international. And you're going to hear a little story about that too, that, it pops up in Italy, it pops up in Germany and they don't even know really. They know it's Western and they know it's, to do with
John Wayne.
It's for John Wayne. That's very good.
That's very interesting. Right. I never thought of it that way, but I know a little bit about the vaquero tradition because you talk about it on the Horsemanship Radio show and a couple of other shows. It comes up occasionally. Very different than what I knew about, quote, cowboys from watching, Tom Mix and the Lone Ranger on TV. Right. That is even different than what I would understand to be ranching and cattle and horse work from the United States. And Europe is going to have its own separate traditions. So from their point of view, what we do to work cattle is not going to be the same as what their tradition would have been. Am I kind of on the right track there?
Yeah, there weren't so many cattle in the European times, the most in the last few hundred years. They just didn't have the room. And in fact, the vaquero tradition, we can touch on that for just a bit. In California, it was really interesting. The Spanish came to California with the big boats in order to pick up probably our most oft exported product, which was skins. So they grew, the big rancheros out the vistas of ranches out here were owned by just a few families, really, from Mexico all the way up through California. And the cattle were just loose out there to feed and grow up. But of course, you couldn't put, a couple hundred years ago, you couldn't put a fatted cow, and lots of them, on boats to take them back to Europe for leather. So they would literally skin them on the beaches here in California. And they had those certain ports where they would come into bays, really, and pick up the skins that had been cured on the beaches. And the meat was left because there really wasn't anybody here to eat it. And you couldn't carry it. So
it was really the leather and the hide that was the commodity, not the food value of the cattle.
That's it.
Interesting.
And so when if the cattle is the biggest industry here, ranching and a good reliable horse that can go all day and herd cattle, it was invaluable. I mean, that was probably that and the cowboy, the vaquero, was the biggest commodity. So fast forward to the early ranching eras where you're starting to get the rodeos are becoming a bit more disciplined and it's becoming more entertainment value than it was practical
rather
value.
Than practical. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's where some of the roots of these disciplines are. So let's talk a little bit about what team pinning is for people before we get into it.
Because I'm a little bit confused. All of these different sports that involve a cow of some size, it gets a little confusing because it's a little bit like, for someone who maybe is more familiar with the Olympic disciplines like show jumping or dressage, it's the difference between the Intermediaire 2 and the Grand Prix. For someone who's inside, it's perfectly obvious what the difference is. But from somebody who is completely greenhorn, it all kind of blends together. So please give me the important details.
Okay. Well, as I've heard them, it's not that I'm a great team putter or anything. I'm not in that discipline, but we did grow up with a lot of the Western disciplines, and then saw the roots of some of those coming through, and that is exactly where team pinnings's roots are: Western ranching work, like we were talking about. But today it's now become a timed event, so it's a fast-paced event that gives a team of 3 riders on horseback from 60 to 90 seconds. It's still some loosey-goosey stuff out there. It's still evolving, depending on the class or the sanctioning of the event. And you're sent in to separate 3 specifically identified cattle from a herd of about 30. And that is in order to put them in a 16 by 24 foot pen, and there's a 10-foot opening at the opposite end of the arena. So you start at one end, and then you're given the numbers. So the sport features 30 cattle with numbers affixed to their back, and 3 each wearing a number between 0 and 9 or sometimes.
So it's like a deck of cards. You have 3 groups of 10 hanging around out there in a big arena.
That's right.
Okay.
Or sometimes they have colored collars rather than attached numbers, and that's evolved too. We'll hear some about that. The timing starts once the line judge has dropped his flag, and then the lead rider's horse crosses the foul line. So there's a foul line there. At that time, then the announcer identifies the cattle to be separated by calling out the randomly drawn numbers or the colored collar.
The flag drops. One of the officiating persons screams out 3. So that means the first rider across that line, he has to go and discern the 3 different cows in that herd who have number 3 on them.
Yeah. So you can start to see identifying those cattle.
And that's harder
quickly.
than it looks, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
That's much harder than it looks.
You'll hear some of that in the interview too, about how they decided, how to get the numbers on the cattle, where to put them, to make it fair for everybody. And, you've seen now they've gone to colored collars but anyway, that's the gist of it, and it is timed, and it is fun and funny, and it's bravado and all kinds of stuff between, and it's really actually been kind of fun. It's very balanced between men and women.
That's true. They don't divide it up class-wise, do they? It's not the men's class and the women's class. They all compete together.
Oh, the women are tough. A good horse and a good hand doesn't matter. So you'll hear some of that. It was a real couples thing. It was a real social, family oriented sport as well, and one of those things that you get together on the weekend and have some fun with. And you'll hear something about the Calcuttas in there, and how they do a little. Put a little money on these things, and
there's always a wager involved.
Yeah, always, yes, and maybe a bottle or two. But other than that,
the wager could be something as small as who's buying tacos at the end of the day, and goes up from there.
It goes way up from there, too. But most importantly, I want the listeners to know that this is about 3 riders and 3 horses in harmony, working together to separate those correct cattle and herd them into a pen while keeping the rest of the herd back. Right. That's, as Jen said, that is not as easy as it sounds. And you really have to have a horse that understands you and is listening to you, and vice versa. You have to understand what that horse's needs are. So there's a lot of horsemanship at stake here. It sounds like a lot of fun, but listen for the horses and the horsemanship in it too.
Can't wait. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Mark Hebner, president of Index Fund Advisors and proud owner of Monty Roberts' Willing Partners graduate, He's a Sugar Bear. Investment portfolios are a lot like horses. You need to find one that best suits you, your temperament, and your stage of life. Some people might like an energetic horse and an aggressive investment portfolio, while others are more comfortable with a gentle ride and a more conservative investment portfolio. The trick is to find the one that's right for you. That's what Index Fund Advisors is all about, matching people with portfolios, risk-appropriate, low-cost, and globally diversified investment portfolios. You can find the right portfolio for you by taking the Risk Capacity Survey at IFA.com. That's IFA as an Index Fund Advisors. Or you can call us toll-free at 888-643-3133. That's 888-643-3133.
So our guests today are John and Georgia Wiester and Monty and Pat Roberts. John Wiester has lived a full life. He's not only a fine horseman, but he's an author and a rancher along with his wife, Georgia, in the San Ynez Valley of California. Their ranch is located in the Santa Rita Hills appellation, which grows some of the finest Pinot Noir grapes in the world. John has been a professor of biology at Westmont College in Santa Barbara, California, and he wrote The Genesis Connection, among other fine books that he's written as well. Monty and Pat Roberts founded Flag Gazette Farms in Solvang, California in 1966, so this is their 50th anniversary and Golden Jubilee year there. Their reputation for raising and training world-class horses is renowned. But many might not know that separating cattle into pens for branding, doctoring, or transport is also something that they have in their skill sets. Team penning, a Western equestrian sport, has evolved, and we're going to hear a little bit about how they talk about the roots of team penning. So both Monty and Pat are fine horse persons, and they met John and Georgia decades ago and struck up a lifelong friendship with horses and whitewater canoeing and team penning all together.
I'm so glad you all agreed to talk a little bit about team penning, because I understand that there's a whole world of information out there on team penning. Some of it's current and some of it goes way back. And I know that some of you go way back. So I thought it'd be fun if we put a little roots in this team penning, because it has been a meandering discipline. And it really started right here in Central California, from what I can see from homework. And my little bit of research took me to Wikipedia. And Wikipedia defines team penning as a Western equestrian sport that evolved from the common ranch work of separating cattle into pens for branding, doctoring, or transport. And I have with me 2 couples. And I'm going to introduce each one of them. I want you to say hi so that they know that you're out here and alive. I've got Pat Roberts with me.
Hi there.
I've got Georgia Wiester.
Greetings.
And Georgia's going to tell us a little bit about, she wasn't Georgia Wiester when she first found out about this team penning thing. And I've got John Wiester.
Hello there.
Hi.
Be here.
Thank you. Happy New Year. And we've got Monty Roberts.
Present.
Yes.
Accounted for.
Accounted for. Good. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the history of the sport, but I wanted to tell you all, in case you're not familiar with the current status of team pinning, that today the sport is the fastest growing Western sport in the United States, Canada, Australia, and Europe. Not to mention North America. So the primary team pinning sanctioning organization in the United States today is the Team Pinning Association, USTPA, headquartered in Fort Worth, Texas. And there are an estimated 93,000 active team pinners in North America alone.
Wow.
Is that amazing?
Wow.
Yeah. So we wanted to hear a little bit about the way you saw team pinning in the beginning. And let's take it back to, I don't know if this goes back as far for you, the Weisters, as it does for the Roberts. But the Roberts are familiar with the team pinning all the way back into the 40s. And I'll start with you, Dad, Monty, to tell us a little bit about your first memories of team pinning, please.
Well, my first memories of team pinning goes back to, I'm going to say 1948. And I do have a pretty good memory, at least when it gets way back there. I can't remember why I came in this room, but way back there I can remember. And I think it's about 1948. And they had some funny little things at the county fair and the county shows and stuff. And there were no rules. That is to say, each time you went to one of these things, there was a different set of rules. And a different pin to put them in, and a different gate to go through, and a different number of cattle, and they put the numbers on in different ways. And there was a lot of conversation. There was a lot of bluster.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of fun. Everybody had fun with the team pinning. And I recall in about 1949, Santa Maria at the fair had the team pinning. I said at the fair, but actually I think it was a connection with the Elks Rodeo in Santa Maria. And after the first night, they had 3 nights, and after the first night, they put it the last event because it was so chaotic. You know, you never knew what was going to happen. And sometimes you took 1 cow out of 10 and put it in through a gate. And sometimes 2, and sometimes 3. And I'm amazed at this 93,000 people. I mean, we didn't have 93 people when I first saw it. And everybody thought they were the best team pinner in the world. Because, in fact, they might be on the day, because anything could happen in the team pinning. And you had the inconsistencies of cattle, horses, and people. And when you put all that together, you're going to get some funny things happening, that's for sure. And now it seems to me you've gone back and done your homework, and Ray and Joe Yanez, from down in Ventura area, they are claiming to be the first ones to ever organize a competition
In Ventura County Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that could have been, they're saying it was probably 49 or something. And I'm saying it was probably 48 or 47. And I have a reason for saying that, because I know when I started high school, and it was the first time I really went to school, and that sort of thing. So Joe and Ray Yanez were top-notch horse people. Cowboys, yeah. And they organized whatever the heck they organized, called team pinning. And I don't know whether they had 1 to bring out, or 2 or 3 or whatever, and the gate they went in and all of that. But later it came to Santa Maria, and there was quite a push for this with the Newhall Land and Farm Company. Yeah, Newhall Land and Farm Company was based in Saugus, Newhall area down there. And the Yanez's worked there quite a bit, and I worked there with Ralph Carter and Vivian Carter way back. And we gathered cattle there in those pens near Newhall, which is now something Seven Flags
Six Flags
amusement park or something like that.
Right.
Well, we had little contests there in the day with this team penning thing, trying to see if there was a way to, constitute a proper contest of it all. And I suppose the Yanis brothers then took it up to the Ventura County Fair, and they actually had the first organized competition. Maybe that's true.
Okay.
But there was a little guy that bounced around. You call him a day hand, I guess. He was with Newhall Land and Farm Company, and he went up and worked at the Sway Ranch part of the time and so forth. A little bitty guy, and he had a squeaky little voice, and he reckoned that he was everything to team penning, this guy. And I recall being at Santa Maria, and I'm in the team penning, and there were, I think, 10 of us and 10 cows. And they put one number on each cow. And they painted the numbers on the side with a spray can. I think it was a spray can. Maybe it was a paintbrush. I don't know. But there were numbers on their sides. But as they put them out in the arena, and they got down in the corner and milled around with one another and stuff, this poor little guy that was the squeaky voice, he was about maybe number 8 out of 10. And when he got in there, these cattle had brushed up against one another enough.
You couldn't see the numbers.
You couldn't see the numbers.
No.
And he was running around the arena yelling, "Sabotage, sabotage, there's no number 7, there's no number 7. And they had to stop the whole thing. And he insisted that the whole thing be done over again because the other guys had a
Better
free
advantage.
run. Advantage. So that's the way team penning began.
In your memory.
In
That's how far
my
back you go.
Yeah,
All right?
and then to bring you full circle with it, and then I'll turn everybody else loose, but it seems to me that right after I had a huge problem here at Flag Us Up Farms, Pat and I came back here to Flag Us Up in 1972.
Ah.
And right after coming back here in 72, it seems to me, if my mind works properly, that there were 2 people who were more cerebral about this business than I ever was. But we have a beautiful covered arena here.
Oh, yes.
And I had cattle here
Yes.
for the cutting horses. And we started fooling around down here in this covered arena. And we made a little pen out of some portable panels or something. And John Weister and Jack Algio,
Yeah.
they were my brain trust.
Yeah.
And they would come over. Well, Algio had cattle here I had a 1,600 head feedlot here. And Algio was doing all of his nutritional experiments here. And so that pushed you over here, John Weister, to bring your horse and come over here, and we would get in there and fiddle around. And you 2 brought to me, as I remember it, you 2 brought to me the idea that we should make some rules.
Right.
And that those rules should be relatively consistent so that you
And
could
uniform.
so that you could take it from town to town.
That's right.
And kind of know what you were going to do when you got there.
Right.
Because the rest of it was utterly chaotic. Well, that seemed to me to be fair, and I had stopped my competitive life in the show ring in 1968 or 69. So I was ready to just have fun.
Right.
And I had some horses that would look at a cow and do some things. So that was good. And you guys started, as I remember it, Algio and Weister really started drawing on paper and doing things and coming up with ideas. The 30 head, 3 head per team, 3 people on the team,
crossing the line.
Crossing. Well, I think the
line.
line came later.
Okay.
Because I think we blew it a bunch of times and had the herd going everywhere. And then
where do you put the team? Where do you put the pin? Do you have it next to
where
the
do you
rail?
put the pin next to the rail? How many feet off?
Yeah, right.
And all that stuff was evolving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? And along comes a great big blustery guy with the bigger belly than he should have had to be riding a horse, called Vince Evans. And Vince Evans owned Pea Soup Anderson's.
Mm-hmm.
And he sat down here in my covered arena and laughed his big old belly off. He did. He just roared with the fun of it all. And he said, you know what we ought to do, if you want to get this thing known, you want people talking about it, you want it to come to the front and actually be a contest, we should start out by having a world championship team pin. Well, now, wait a minute. We didn't even have, a pot or a window. A world championship team pinning. Yeah, well, Vince thought that way, didn't he?
He did.
He did.
Big thinker.
Yeah, big thinker.
And he put up the money, too.
And he put up the money to make it happen.
Need those guys.
Yeah,
You
right.
need those.
Yeah, and so then Bacon went to somebody, John Bacon up here went to somebody about the San Marcos camp.
Oh, yeah.
And we decided that the San Marcos camp would be a great spot, which it was.
Yeah.
Because they could camp
people
out.
to camp out. Yeah.
They could camp out. They didn't bother anybody. You could run the cattle trucks in there and out of there and everything. It was fantastic. It's about 15 miles, 20 miles to the east of San Ynez there, Solvang. And it's in a very rural setting with a good arena.
Oh, great arena.
And everything was there. And so we had the first World Championship team pinning, I'm going to say it was 1975. And we had probably, I don't know, Gene Rambo was in there.
Well, guys came all the way from Wyoming.
Yeah. We had
Yeah.
maybe 30, 40 teams, which is 100 riders, roughly. 100 riders in the thing. We had a Calcutta pool.
Big Calcutta pool.
Yeah, that we did, and we had the first World Championship team pinning. I remember so clearly that I got the FFA, Future Farmers of America, to make tri-tip sandwiches to sell there to benefit the FFA.
Right.
And some guy came along that was considered himself a team pinner. There were no team pinners yet, but he was an important guy to himself anyway. And he asked how much those sandwiches were. And those kids said they're $3. And he said, I wasn't looking to buy a cow. $3 for a sandwich? Well, he got really angry. And he wanted to take us to court and stuff for charging $3 for a beautiful barbecue tri-tip sandwich. And it really turned me off. I thought, here we are out here having fun, and somebody's complaining about buying a sandwich. But anyway, those are the kind of memories that come back. We had live music. We had a dance.
We had a big dance afterwards.
Yeah.
Sure.
And
It's the only way to keep the women around, apparently,
Well,
back then.
it was.
No, we were competing. We were there.
Oh, there you go, George.
The women were
Okay.
competing, too.
Good.
Oh yeah. In fact, the Davis boys with their wife,
Jan and Gary and Bobby
K. Davis.
Oh, yeah.
She was a tough team pinner right from the first year we had it. And I know that I bought Gene Rambo in the Calcutta, and he didn't win anything. And he was my hero.
I can remember one of the funniest things from that thing was two guys got in a fight over a woman. And and I think it was you, Monty. Said, well, put him in the arena, we'll Calcutta him.
That figures. Well, that's kind of the end of me, because somehow they made me president of it for a while, and I was trying to help make things happen. But the real shakers and movers in this were Aljo Weister and Vince Evans. And we started in my covered arena, and we did the thing, and I helped what I could. But really, those were that was the brain trust that started the team penning. And then we had people that had different ideas about it, and they broke off and made other organizations and stuff. And the last thing I have to say on it is that some 30 years later or 40 years later, I was doing one of my shows near Rome in Italy. And it was at a big fairgrounds there. And the fairgrounds had various events going on the weekend. And I noticed there's a bunch of horses all tied down the fence over there with Western saddles on. And the people riding around looking like they were from Elko, Nevada. You know, and so I walked down there thinking, I got to find out what's going on here.
Wow.
And so I went up to some young lady who was riding by on her horse, and I said, "What's happening here?" And she said, "Oh, it's the Italian National Team Penning Championship."
Whoa, you are kidding.
I said, "What are you talking about? Where did you hear about team
Italian
penning?"
National Team Penning Championship?
Yeah. I said, "Where do you hear about team penning?" Oh, she said, "We've been team penning here now for 5 years," or whatever it was, something like that, you know. And I said, "Well, for crying out loud, whoever dreamed up this thing, team penning?" Oh, she said, "It came from the American Quarter Horse Association." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, you tell, is the president of your organization here?" She said, "Yes." "You tell him to come and talk to me, because he needs some information." So the president and I got to know one another, and I explained to him some of the early days of the team penning. And what happened was that the American Quarter Horse Association, in the early 80s, they were looking for an event possibly for the
quarter horses.
Yeah.
Sure.
And somebody was there from Italy when they were testing out some of these things in the quarter horse shows, took the idea back to Italy, took the rules, your rules.
Oh, God.
Who was the brain trust? Did you come up with more rules than Aljo, or did Aljo come up with more rules?
That's hard to say.
Yeah.
That's hard to say.
But you two were the ones really coming up with the rules.
That's right, because we had to make them uniform. It was crazy.
Yeah.
The way it was.
And you mentioned earlier this line across the middle of the arena. Well,
the foul line.
Yeah, the foul line. Well,
and the start line too.
And
that's
the start line.
That's when the time started too.
Yeah.
And you had to decide how many cows would be allowed to go over it before you eliminated the
Right.
team.
I think we might have started out with 2 and then pulled it back to 1. But you see, before we had the foul line, we had some contests, and we had the herd all over the county.
Yep.
You know.
Ended up all over the place.
Yeah. So those things evolved as we went along, and of course then one-on-one happened, and now when you look back at it, I mean, cattle rustlers were the first team pinners, weren't they? and you have camp drafting in Australia, which is very similar, but you have to take one cow and put it through a course.
Oh, my
you know,
goodness.
like the sheepdog would
like
tend to do.
Would do.
Yeah, and then there's forms of this kind of thing all over the world. They even have in Australia, they have 4-track. They call it camp drafting.
Oh.
And you're drafting the cattle at the camp.
Oh.
And they call it camp drafting. And they have it for 4 tracks, and they have it for helicopters.
Oh, geez.
Can you imagine?
So I'm loving hearing the background on this, but there's more to come. We've got some interesting stories coming up, and we're going to take a little break here for our sponsor, Omega Fields. We're really excited because Sean's Omega Fields company has done something amazing for one of our test horses. His name is Cadillac. And we felt so strongly about it that we definitely wanted to bring him on as a sponsor of Horsemanship Radio. And we wanted you to know that it came in that order first, is that we were so impressed with this product and with this horse's results that we wanted to have him a part of our monthly shows. What is it about the Omega Fields product? Something's different.
Omega Fields was built around a really unique and proprietary technology. Flaxseed has been known for a long time to contain rich source of omega-3 fatty acids along with omega-6 and omega-9 fatty acids in a near perfect balance. But historically, there was a problem using it. It's high in fat, and when it was milled into a feed product or a food product, it would go rancid very quickly. So our company had developed a proprietary technology for stabilizing this high-fat flaxseed to make it usable, give it a long shelf life in a natural environment. We don't use any chemicals or additives to extend the shelf life or anything like that. It's a completely natural process. That's what makes our flax really different. It makes it usable. It makes it nutritious over a long period of time. We guarantee an 18-month shelf life, so consumers can use it with confidence without it going rancid that, would potentially harm the horse. So quality of manufacture, every single thing in that product, Omega Horse-Shine, is food grade. It's made at a food grade facility with great care of product quality. The stabilization technology makes that omega-3 nutritional value locked in and usable for a long period of time. So proof is in the pudding, so to speak, that it really works. You'll see dramatic results in a fairly short period of time.
That sounds great. I want to hear from the Weisters now, too. So you guys, were you competing, John, in the team penning before you met Georgia? Or was that...
Probably just about that time.
So this is
what
in the 70s.
I remember best of all was the family team penning.
That's what I remember.
Monty mentioned earlier about fun, and that was really fun, because you'd have the father and the mother and the little kid, and or sometimes two kids and the mom and whatnot, and it had to be a family, and it had to be three, and anyway, that was so much fun. All my children still remember that.
They do. And the Firestones, you mentioned that the Firestones had their kids involved. Yeah. Who else was family here?
Major. I mean, that was major. Brooks really got into it, as did Kate.
As did
the girls.
The Davises.
And we had
Schley's.
Schley's,
yeah. Schley family.
Nancy Schley. And, my gosh, that was Sandy Collier. Well, Sandy Collier and Georgia and one other lady who I can't remember had the world record for women at one time. I think it was 30 seconds or something crazy.
I don't know. I just know one time when we were running after him and one went out over the fence. And the speaker said that we were eliminated for roughing the cattle. That's just not so.
The cattle are roughing you.
And then another time I remember with John, and I can't remember who else was with us, but it was over in Lompoc.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a great little horse, Sundance, and it was small, and it was like a Mustang. May have been.
Yeah. And
we were running straight for the fence. We had one thing that really makes a difference when you're team penning is where your numbers are when you first spot them, because they just might, by a fortune, be all together in one group. Then you can round up and get them in there really fast, but when they're spread all through the group, it's much harder. But we had a really lucky break. And I went after mine and was riding hard toward the fence, and of course I was going to go left, scoop around to put them in the pen. But somehow Sundance had another idea, and Sundance went right, and I went straight.
Nope.
And I still had the reins and somehow landed on my feet, and I knew I was in trouble. I got back on as fast as I could, and of course the cow had disappeared. And we started to bell rang, and we started to ride out of the arena, and John starts yelling at me, and the arena had high sides, the sheet out of it had high sides. There's a cowboy sitting up there. I don't remember who it was. And John was saying to me, "Where were you? What did you do?" And this man up there on the fence said, "She fell off." And John started into a fight with him. And I just rode on out. I figured that wasn't a good place to stick around.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of fun. I don't remember there being money in it in the beginning.
No,
I sort of remember the change coming when
we did
bots came in and people started practicing and videotaping themselves for practice and everything. We never did that. We just...
Is there money in it now?
I bet there is.
I never saw any money from it.
We didn't either.
The money was all going the other way.
Yeah, I think that's the way a lot of these disciplines first start. It's it starts off as something fun and it's a
really
challenge
fun,
and backyard and family.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right.
Big day.
Yeah. So tell me about the horses. Dad alluded a little bit that you could pretty much pick a horse that didn't blow up or ignore you. So what kind of horses did you use as a rule? One Mustang, I've heard.
Yeah.
Well, the best horse, of course, was Fancy Heels that actually Monty was gracious enough to sell to me. And I mean, that horse, I couldn't even compete with how good he was. And,
it's a quarter horse?
That's how we won a championship one year with Jack Aljo and my nephew John Thorne. And that's the great story of the buckle.
Tell the story of the buckle. That's a good story.
Well, Georgia very fortunately, after we won the Santa Maria Team Penning Championship at roughly 62nd, it was the county championship actually. Anyway, inscribed on the back the names of the three of us and the time that we had when the thing of it is. And then several years later, we were foolish enough to be canoeing down the Suicide Run with the San Ynez River, and I was with Pat Roberts. And anyway, it was one of those things where you can't see the worst rapids from the road, and we went into the worst rapid, and over we went, and I got caught with this buckle on the gunwale of the canoe, and sort of whipped it off because I was drowning.
Yeah.
Came back up, lost the buckle. I mean, it just felt terrible. And what was it? That summer, some camper, when the river was dry, was walking up the river and saw this shiny object and pulled it out. And fortunately, there were our names on the back, so was able to locate us and return the buckle.
The buckle. So his world championship team penning buckle came back. Just to prove that you were there. Yeah, that's an awesome story.
Give your atheist a call about
there
that
we
one.
go. It's pretty hard.
And by all means, inscribe on the back of the buckle when it was and what happened and who the time was and the whole
It's just
works.
a coincidence. You know what a coincidence is, don't you?
Yeah, it's God's
God
way of
performs
remaining
a miracle and chooses to remain anonymous.
anonymous.
That's a good one. I love that.
Yeah, I think, Debbie, one name that needs to come into this conversation very quickly is that after prior to the first World Championship team penning, we put the numbers on the cattle in about 27 different ways.
That's right.
They had numbers on the shoulders. They had numbers on the hips. They had numbers on the sides. They were painted on with a brush. They were painted on with a spray can. Everybody had an idea about how to put numbers on. And I think it was Weister. I'll give him
Bill Deputy.
Yeah, I think it was Weister. I'll give him credit for it right now. No, hear me out now, because I think it was Weister that came to me and said, I know a guy who's been watching all of these things from the side, and he thinks he has some good ideas about how to do the number.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And I think Aljo said, okay. And you said his name is Bill Deputy.
Yeah.
Now, Bill Deputy was a mechanic, I don't know. He's something to do with his hands. He was a mechanic or something. And he knew about glues and materials and stuff like that. So he started fiddling about. And this character, he came here a dozen different... See, I had a roping chute in my covered arena. And always had cattle here for the cutting horses and stuff. So he'd run some cattle in, and he'd stick these things on them, and put them out in a pen, and come back tomorrow and see
if they were still there.
Yeah, and he went to Charlie Hollister about the glue that they use on the sales cattle.
The sales
in the sales
Sales
barn.
yard.
Yeah.
Sure, the building sales yard.
And Charlie Hollister apparently told him about a new glue that just came out that was waterproof, like that it could rain on the cattle and stuff like that. And so Deputy started experimenting with these different glues, and then he experimented with different materials.
Yes.
A canvas type thing, and I think he ended up with a kind of an oilcloth that had fabric on one side, a fabric-like texture on one side, and slick on the other side that would hold the paint. I suppose now with 90,000 people doing this, they probably manufacture these numbers. But I promise you, if they're manufacturing them today, they're probably still using Bill Deputy's methods. Because when Bill Deputy got it right, we just never had any problem losing numbers after that time.
People could read them really well.
You could read them clear across the thing. He placed them in such a way so that excrement from the other cattle didn't cover them up, and bumping the fence didn't curl them up, and it was a tremendous thing.
Flat of the hip up on top.
Yeah, and Bill Deputy still comes here.
I see him at the horse shows all the time.
And watches the horses
Laura?
working.
Wow.
His wife Laura was on the team that came here sticking these things, these numbers on, and they had 2 or 3 friends that came along with them, and they were a committee unto themselves that really made.
You couldn't run a team penning without them.
You couldn't do it.
No.
If it hadn't been for Bill Deputy or somebody else that would have done the same thing, team pinning never would have gone anywhere, because we couldn't keep the numbers on them for your life.
To make it fair for everybody.
I was in one team pinning somewhere. I think it was like up near San Jose somewhere. And they put a tiny little number square between the eyes on every, and that's the only number that was on it. Well, you tell me how you ride into the herd and look between the eyes of the cattle. That's how bad we were, Well, they had to finally just quit that team penning because nobody could find cattle anywhere. And they had people up on the fence yelling, over here, over here, over there.
People used to be yelling at you. You couldn't hear a thing because you were going crazy in there too.
The number 7's over here.
And then when they instituted that you couldn't, I think the first I heard, you couldn't bring more than 3 extra over the line. And then it kept reducing down to, I think it's 0. The last I heard.
It might be. I don't know. I think when I gave it all up,
changed it.
I think when I gave it all up, you could bring 1 extra over and kick him back.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's
No,
right. It didn't count till you kicked them back. That's
didn't count.
Back over the line.
No, but tell me, how did the watch stop?
Oh, when you lifted your hat.
Who?
Whoever was in the gate.
The first team, the first one on the 3-man team that did it.
It didn't have to be all 3.
No.
But you all had to be across the line on the right side.
across the line.
And all the other cattle had to be on the other side of the line.
Right.
Okay.
But
3 people didn't have to be standing in the gate.
No, just one.
Just the one that made them all go in there.
Well, the last one, first one, as soon as he went in, raised his hat. That was it.
Well, if you didn't have a hat on.
Well, you better
Hats
have
were
a hat.
required, remember?
What's that?
We had to wear hats.
Is that right?
Well,
That's right.
it was required, but you could lose one during your
Yes,
run.
yes. But you had to.
But I
enter
guess
the
you could just
competition
raise your
with
hand and get
right.
the. But I remember the argument that what was the name of the secretary of
Lorraine Lafarge.
Lorraine Lafarge.
Oh, yes.
Well, she was very upset with all of us because she was up there doing the timing, and I think maybe
Isn't there somebody to drop the flag?
Yeah. There's a flag, John, on the line.
Yeah.
But then Lorraine and Aljo's secretary, Lorraine.
That was Lorraine.
That's
yeah.
all right.
And then I think Deputy's wife, they were doing the timing.
Laura, maybe.
Yeah, that's right.
And they were shouting at us because they were asking, who do we watch for the time? Who do we watch for the time? Because they're looking here, and everybody else had to watch where the cattle were and all of that sort of thing. And so it came down to some rule was made, and like you just clarified, the first person to run them in the pen could stand in the gate and raise their hand, and that stopped the watch.
Right.
It had to
And
be
you
real
didn't,
fast.
if you didn't have all your cattle across, you couldn't raise your hand,
Right,
because she's going to punch the watch, and then you got 0,
Right.
because
Well, unless you settled for only 1 or 2.
Well, true.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
That's,
You'd
you
settle for-
could do that.
You
Yeah.
could do
But
that.
then you had to really watch it because they'd shoot back out if you were
Yeah.
standing in the gate.
Is there a time penalty if you didn't get all 3? Is that
Yes.
why could you?
Well, it came down to if somebody had 3 in, they were obviously the winner.
I
And
see.
sometimes it was so rough and the cattle were so wild that you were lucky to get 1 in, and maybe 2, so that it was a 2
I
trump
see.
1, 3 trump 2, 2 trump 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a balancer within the
Right.
within the cattle themselves.
That
Yeah.
became pretty fun.
Yeah.
But of course, the big deal is get your 3 in as fast as you can.
Yeah. That's
Well, you know,
the trick.
I think, Debbie, it's important to say that a lot of people who love horses and animals in general are often looking for things to ban. You know, ban this, ban that, ban this, ban that. And team penning came along at a time when horses needed something to do. We don't need them to plow the fields anymore, pull the trees down and all that sort of thing. So you just keep banning things, and pretty soon nobody needs a horse for anything. And having fun, and a family, like you all mentioned,
Really great.
team penning brought a whole new perspective to at least the Western world of horsemanship, in that it gave thousands of horses another job to do. And even people who weren't competing in team penning were home playing with it, you know, and jackpot roping arenas would have team penning on the Wednesday or something like that, you know. And there are circumstances, in my opinion, whereby there are events that should be canceled, banned. The Omak suicide race. A horrible thing, jumping horses off a cliff into a river and swimming across the river and stuff. They killed horses and everything. Just ban it. That's okay.
And it is banned.
And it is banned.
Yeah.
And the wild horse race should be banned, and it is pretty much no longer in existence.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing they do in Italy, called something or other, where they run those horses, they run races on cobblestone streets, and the horses are falling down, people get killed, and horses get killed. You ban them. But be careful what you ban. Right now they're talking about banning horses from the carriages in New York City. My opinion is that the real estate people want those stable areas for high-rise buildings.
Probably.
But they say that they're badly cared for, they say their feet are bad, they say this and that and the other thing. And they may be right in some instances. But with today's standards, you could chip these horses and be sure that farriers went by and checked them. You could be sure that veterinarians went to see that they were cared for properly and that their weight was right and one thing and another. And those kids in the middle of New York City may only see one horse in their life, and it's on a carriage. And then you have places like New Orleans and several towns in California and Texas and New Mexico.
Solvang right here.
Solvang right here. You know, we need to be careful what we ban horses from, because they've been banned from enough things, in my opinion. We just need to get our events better, more compassionate to
that's
the
what
horses'
you've
needs.
done with team penning, and that's what's so fun about this conversation is going back to exactly.
You're putting team penning on the radio, because it is finding something else for the horse to do that's fun. It's wonderful for the families.
Right.
It's,
and I'm also hearing that it's a dating service, because Georgia and John were dating at the time, but Mom tells me that she was actually dating you when you did your first team penning. So I'd love to hear from her about that.
That's true. That was in 1955, I believe. And at that time, there were a lot of mixed team roping and team penning. And it didn't necessarily have to be a mixed team penning, but I remember that my introduction to team penning was that year, 1955, and Monty and I going to King City, California, and competing in the mixed team roping and the team penning. and we won both.
Wow.
Did we?
We did.
Holy moly.
I know.
Were we the only ones entered?
No, we weren't the only ones entered. Undoubtedly, I was the greenest, though, of anyone that was in that competition. So
Well,
you
it was
carried
your
me
first
well.
time, so that's as green as grass.
Yeah, and I was.
Yeah,
But
well,
it was fun.
there were a lot of
That's
mixed
great.
events at that point in time,
Mm-hmm.
and now the dadgum girls are taking over.
Good job.
So
there you go.
That's the way it is.
It was really fun with the family, seeing the little kids out there, though,
Yeah.
with their parents and the interaction, and we'd all camp in those overnight out in the dark. I can remember in the tents, and we had all the kids along, and then we had the dance afterward. I think it was the Egan brothers.
Yeah, Egan
Yeah,
Brothers.
goodness.
Yeah.
And those tri-tip sandwiches were
We're
worth
good.
$3.
They're worth $3. Tri-tip, we should explain to the listeners too, that that's a very Central Coast California birthplace for tri-tip sandwiches. It is that piece of meat that was known as the Santa Maria style, isn't
That's
it?
right.
Yeah.
Cooked and it's
Santa Maria
encased in
style
its
barbecue.
fat. Now a lot of people have heard of it, but at the time, I bet
Yeah,
that was...
it's becoming wider known, but it's actually the tip of the sirloin, and it's a triangular piece of meat that fits just ahead of the rump roast and onto the sirloin, and they call it a tri-tip, and it has a bark of fat over it so that when it cooks, it bastes itself, and it's tender and it's tasty, and the FFA needed the funds, so it probably cost them $2 to make the doggone sandwich, and they were getting $1 for bringing it up there to us, you know. So I was pleased to have gotten them, and it was a lot of fun. Remember Dick McBride? He was the coach of the football team at the high school here, and he started team pinning, and he was a madman out there. I remember one time. You'll probably want to cut this, but I remember one time we were up there and the dance was going on and stuff, and the Hells Angels motorcycle group came rumbling into the campgrounds, and that was a real war. Lawrence Snow was there, was about 6 or 8 of his sons, and they had a big war with the Hells Angels and ran them out of the place.
I just remember we were all told to get in our tent and stay there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you remember the incident? Yeah.
How funny. So one, we got to do a name dropper in here. You said that there was only one undefeated person that you remember in team pinning, Monty, that he went into it. It was so easy for him. He won the first thing and quit after that because he was undefeated. Do you remember who that was?
Casey Tibbs.
Really?
Yeah. Casey Tibbs came here and was down here team pinning with us, and he just got the biggest kick out of that team pinning. And somebody talked to him. I can't remember who he teamed up with, but somebody talked to him, and we went down to the Eastern Empire there. Where did Farrell Jones live?
Oh, way down Hemet?
Hemet. Went down to Hemet. So Casey Tibbs came here, practiced with us, got enthused about team pinning, and decided he wanted to go to a team pinning. Well, they were going to have one down in Hemet, California. And he teamed up with somebody, I can't remember who. And I kept telling him, it's harder than you think it is, you know.
Yeah, it looks easy.
It looks easy. And so we get down there, and he goes in the arena, and I don't know, they won by like 15 seconds or something. All 3 of them, like Georgia said, all 3 of them were standing on one corner. Tibbs ran around them like a wraparound, and in the pen they went, and he won the whole thing, and it's the only team pinning he ever entered. And he was a multiple world champion, saddle bronc rider, and all-around cowboy. But just before he died, he came to a very large gathering for him. He was in his final stages of cancer at the National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas. And I sat and visited with him and reminded him of his winning of the team pinning. And he said, I told you that was easy. So all he ever knew of team pinning was that it was really easy.
Beginner's luck.
So I remember they kept changing the gate position, too. as they were refining it. It
Oh,
became
gosh.
harder and harder to get those cattle in there.
Yeah,
They
well,
only got it on the back sides, so the cows were headed right back toward the herd, but you had to fit them through this little opening.
yeah, but Georgia, before your time, sometimes they would have like a little 3-foot gate in the fence line going into a corral. You didn't even have a portable pen. You had to put them through somebody's arena gate, you know. And when John and Aljo started figuring out this pen, I don't think this way. I do not think this way. Because the pen isn't square.
No.
And it isn't round. And the opening is off at an angle, and there's a wing on it and stuff. And nothing fits for me. I'm a linear thinker. And I said, you can't make this way because nobody will ever repeat exactly how it's done. Yes, they will. It's so many feet across the back. It's so many feet on a 90-degree angle. So and so and so. And they did it. And it's there, and I see it in my head right now. So it works, you know, but you could have given me 50 years and I never would have figured it out. But Leister and Aljo, they figured it out.
That was fun. What a great time we had doing that. And, I wish we were still doing it.
No.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't go that fast on a horse
Oh,
anymore.
Pat can still do it.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to do it.
Did you know that?
Are you still doing it?
I'm still competing
Oh,
with cow horse classes.
Did you know that?
I knew you were in the cow horse classes because we went over to watch you one day. Yeah.
Well, she was the champion last year
Oh my God.
for the year.
5,000 non-pro. Yeah.
Wow.
Got a buckle
She
to
won
prove
the
it.
championship.
Got a buckle.
Whoa.
Still after those buckles.
Have you got it on?
No, I don't have it on, but it's a pretty buckle.
But you can see that she's sculpting still.
Yeah.
Not enough.
Yeah.
And not fast enough. But
She has other duties.
Yeah.
Taking care of
Nursing.
But she's still sculpting. But when she started sculpting, she put the saddle down, and she really never showed in competition for 40 years.
Oh my goodness.
40 years without
That's courage.
anything like that. Then she puts the
Crazy.
saddle back on, and
That's great.
there you go.
You go
And she
for it.
wins the championship
Yeah.
right here. Oh
Actually,
wow.
that's the second time I've done that, and I was reserve champion one other time. So I've had a good 4 or 5 years.
That's great.
It's
And-
fun. It's
I
fun.
hear
And
you
don't-
started on Monty's horse when he was out of town.
Oh yeah, got in big trouble there. Actually, I started on a mare that I had she was quite nice, but we were going to sell her after the staff vet fraternity. She wouldn't pass the vet, so I said, well, what are we going to do with her? And that's when I started. And I said, well, I better go and start showing again. And I started showing her, and that's what got me back into it. And she's never been unsound. So there.
It can be cut from this tape, but the 2 championships and the reserve championship that she won, she was the oldest person in the whole body of people that competed
That's the way to show.
throughout the year. But you can cut that because she still claims to be 42 or something.
Still looks 42.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Well, thank you guys for sharing all that. It's just adorable and fun, and I hope we get to do it. So did you start any other disciplines that are up to 93,000 teams on Earth now? Or
Well, certainly not the canoeing of the Santa.
no, we're not.
Well, we're doing something new for 2016, and we're having a lot of fun with it. Jamie Jennings, as you know from Horses in the Morning, is the co-host, and she is enlisted now to help us with our new segment called Ask Monty. And it's really about the most common horse problems solved, but we're solving them with a typical Monty Roberts concept answer.
Whisper the language of the herd. Listen, you don't have to say a word.
It's time for Jamie Jennings to fetch an email from Monty Roberts' inbox and share a morsel of Monty's wisdom in a little segment we like to call Ask Monty.
Leave this world a better place than mine. The magic in the language of the herd.
I purchased your book last week and am pleased that I've already learned some of your good horse sense through trial and error myself. A very inspiring read for a horse lover. I grew up on a farm as a kid in a beautiful part of Saskatchewan. There was and still is lots of unspoiled room to ride, and I've had the good fortune to have a horse while growing up. However, there's a lot of wisdom for me to gain yet. I've always wondered more about the animal's language as well. I knew there was one, but I couldn't translate much of it. Is there more? Monty's answer. It is a long process for me to prove to myself and be satisfied that my definition of a gesture is true and demonstrable. I am not fully satisfied that I have any further gesture identification to add to what is included in my books to date. I applaud you for continuing to investigate the potential to identify further gestures and their appropriate meaning. It is my hope that one day I might be able to witness your work and assess your findings. Please continue to explore. It is fun, and who knows what you might discover. It would not be right to leave you with the notion that the language of Equus has been fully identified. I am certain that the future holds many discoveries in this area. I firmly believe what we now know is far less than what is waiting to be discovered.
Hi, I'm Monty Roberts, and I'm dedicated to training horses without pain. You can learn to do it too on my Equus Online University. Western, English, the beginner, or the advanced rider. It doesn't matter. You can connect with other students online too, on our forum, and there's a new lesson every week. It's a lifetime of learning for you on my Equus Online University at montyroberts.com.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
Where in the world is Monty Roberts?
Monty is looking forward to meeting some new friends, two-legged and four-legged. Coming up in March, he's got an English tour with 3 days, March 5th, 11th, and 19th. And then in April, he'll head over to Denmark, where he'll be in Wilhelmsborg. Then he heads to Germany, close by, and he'll have dates 4/21, that's April 21, April 23rd, April 30th. And then the last two are in Austria. That's May 5th and May 7th. Whew. He's a busy boy. Then he jumps in a plane, and in July 17 through 21, he has his Monty's Special Training, which is a translation in Portuguese. Then August 1st through 5, he has Monty's Special Training at Flag is Up Farms, California. And then August 22 through September 2, it'll be the second Gentling Wild Horse course at Flag is Up Farms. Those are so exciting.
I can see someday that the Gentling Wild Horses courses will be streamed live.
Oh, that would be so cool to have a webcam.
Would that not be awesome? So that people can participate because so much of the skill set, you need to see it. It's so hard to explain. It's so subtle.
It is.
Totally.
Timing and seeing the honesty of those Mustangs. They're the coolest teachers in the horse world, hands down to me.
Yeah. And if you are not able to commit all of that to memory, you can find out all of those things and more at montyroberts.com, or you can get Monty's calendar by calling Flag is Up Farm at 805-688-6288. And for details about today's show, go to horsemanshipradio.com, where you can find links and photos and more information about our guests, and there will be no dog involved. As always, we love your feedback. Please follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Monty Roberts, or if you're a tweeter, you can tweet Monty, Monty_Roberts.com, and get the app. Make it easy to listen to Horsemanship Radio. Go to the App Store and search Horse Radio Network. You can download it. It's quick, it's free, and it's easy, and get all of your favorite Horse Radio Network shows. It's for iTunes or Android.
That's the way to do it. Google Play. That's it. So many thanks to our sponsors too, IFA.com, Omega Fields, and Monty Roberts Equus Online University. And be sure to visit all the other great shows on the Horse Radio Network, the growing network, at www.horseradionetwork.com. Until next time, have many happy horse hours.